When I picked up the phone to ask my son Max when his wedding would be, Lena answered before he did. Her voice was light, practiced, an easy smile heard through glass. "Oh, we already got married yesterday," she said as if sharing a trivial detail. "We only invited special people." Those words landed like a bucket of ice water. Special people. The phrase exploded inside me, not because of its cruelty alone but because of everything it erased in an instant. 3 years of rent I'd paid, groceries I'd stocked, the new sofa in their living room, the pale pink dress folded in my closet waiting to be worn at the front row of my son's happiest day. I, the woman who had emptied savings, balanced budgets, and held late-night babies, was suddenly not special. I stood in my living room holding the phone like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Through the walls of my own house, the ordinary domestic sounds continued: the kettle, a neighbor's television, but everything felt distorted, as if reality itself had leaned away from me. Max didn't correct her. He didn't say, "Mom, wait, please come." He let her speak for us both. My son had learned to look away. That same night I opened my drawer and pulled out the dress. I had spent $200 on it, not for the fabric but for the idea of being part of his life's milestones. I'd imagined myself in his wedding photos, smiling, proud, and yet the photos I would later see would contain strangers and relatives, not the woman who had put food on their table and light in their refrigerator. I'd set aside $1,000 as a wedding gift. I'd told my sister in Chicago about the plans. I had cleaned the entire house, thinking maybe they'd come over after the ceremony. All those small, hopeful arrangements collapsed with 4 poison words: only special people. At midnight, when the house was finally quiet, I sat on the edge of my bed and did what I had always done with strong emotions. I cried. But the tears were not purely sorrow. They tasted like something older and harder: anger wrapped in grief. I cried for the countless small humiliations I had absorbed, for the way each donation, each favor, had become a currency used against me. I cried for the woman I had been, accommodating, forgiving, invisible when it suited others and present only when it suited them. I woke the next morning different. Not because the world had changed, but because I had. There was a new hardness under my tired eyes, a clarity I hadn't felt in years. For 40 years I had made coffee every morning, shuffled bills, dialed numbers, paused my life to answer their emergencies. That morning I made my coffee and watched the steam rise without thinking how it would calm someone else. I did not check my phone. I had no urgent need to be needed. I took out my checkbook and my bank statements. Numbers have a terrible honesty. I had avoided this exercise for so long because counting the cost of love felt like measuring betrayal. But the ledger is a map, and I needed to know where I had been lost. Monthly rent $500 multiplied by 36 months, $18,000. Food and supplies $200 a month, another $7,200. Birthday and holiday gifts roughly $3,000. Medical emergencies and small loans $800 here, $2,500 there. A refrigerator, furniture, repair, sums that add up until the total becomes a life-altering number. When I finished, the total sat on the page like a verdict: $33,400. $33,400 taken from my husband's inheritance, from the pension I had planned to live on, from decades of careful saving. I had spent those dollars hoping to buy love or keep it, or at least to secure a place at their table. Instead, I had bought comfort for people who would not share their most joyful hours with me. The phone began to ring. Max. Lena. The same rhythm, different name. Usually, the sight of his name made my heart quicken an old, reflexive tenderness, but that morning I let it ring until it stopped. I did not answer when they called. I deleted a pleading text. For the first time in a long time, I put my own peace before the demand blinking on my screen. I walked without a purpose. I passed the park where I had pushed Max on the swings, where his small hands had grasped mine and declared me the best in the world. That child had grown into a man who could exclude me from his wedding and then ring my phone for money as if nothing had changed. How had we failed each other so quietly that the betrayal arrived wrapped in normalcy? At the bank, the manager, Mr. Klein, waved as if he, too, had known me for decades. He had seen the steady withdrawals, the automatic transfers that left my account thin but always able to answer for them. He blinked when I asked to cancel the transfers. For 3 years they had been more punctual than the sunrise. "Are you sure?" he asked, concern plain as daylight. His voice was steadier than Max's had been, truer than the words I'd been fed over the phone. Max protested. We have obligations, rent, car payments. You can't just cut us off. You made obligations based on my money, I replied. Not on my well-being. Not on my love. You built plans on a foundation you didn't earn. Dr. Fisher laid a folder on the table. A power of attorney could help manage things temporarily, he suggested, an attempt dressed as reason. I picked up the folder and without opening it, let it fall into the trash can with a faint, decisive flutter. Their plan to fast-forward inheritance into entitlement lay in that folder. Theatrics of legalism do not disguise greed. They left with the wounded posture of those who expected obedience. Before the door closed, Max paused in the doorway and offered a warning garbed as concern. This will end badly for you. You'll be alone when you need care. I watched them go. Alone. The word had been a shadow over me for a long time, but now it felt different. Not abandonment, but freedom chosen. I am already alone, I said aloud into the empty room, but this time it's by my choice. Silence settled, a clear, beautiful silence I had not heard in years. It was the silence of being unbought, unbothered. That night I could not sleep, not from worry, but from a fierce adrenaline I had not known lay under my careful compliance. I lay awake drafting a plan, change the locks, install cameras, open a new bank account, and consult with an attorney who would not wear the masks my family wore. At dawn I met Mr. Weber, an attorney I had trusted when settling my late husband's affairs. He listened without interruption and then named their conduct for what it was, older financial abuse. It's more common than people think, he told me gently. We'll document everything, transfers, gifts, pressures. We'll change your will and secure your assets. He examined the figures and did not flinch. $33,400 over 3 years. With this, he said, you could have enjoyed retirement, traveled, hired care if needed. Instead, you financed others' lives. His words were consolation, yes, but also a scalding mirror. Walking back from his office, I felt the newness of a future not spent entirely for others. I bought new locks and a security system. I opened an account in another bank under a different name, something private and practical. Each administrative step felt like stitching up a wound that had been torn by entitlement and disguised as familial obligation.
That day, after so much action, I sat at my dining table, the same table where I had once counted their bills, planned their surprises, and cried quietly when they treated me like an inconvenience. Now that table witnessed something else, the planning of a life reclaimed. I would not be pitied. I would not be controlled. I would be careful, yes, and smart. The war I would wage if it came would be legal, disciplined, not emotional fury thrown into an abyss. Outside my window, the world went on, people hurrying to shops, children on their way to school. Inside, under the softness of a late afternoon light, I allowed a small, almost guilty smile. It was the smile of someone who had finally seen her reflection without the fog of obligation. It was the smile of someone who had discovered that dignity is not a thing you buy with dollars, it is a thing you reclaim with choices. When I returned home that afternoon, the locksmith was already waiting at my gate. He was a calm man with weathered hands and eyes that had seen too many broken locks and perhaps too many broken hearts. Changing all of them? He asked, holding up a bundle of shiny new keys. Yes, I answered. Every single one. The whirring sound of his drill echoed through the quiet hallway, metallic and final. Each screw that came loose felt like a chain snapping off my soul. When he fitted the new locks, the click of metal against metal sounded almost musical, like freedom finding its rhythm. By the time he finished, the sun had started to dip. Golden light poured through my curtains and wrapped the living room in a soft, forgiving glow. The same room that once echoed with raised voices, guilt, and manipulation now felt sacred again. I stood in that silence, holding the new keys in my palm, and whispered to myself, these are not just keys to my house, they are keys to my peace. I brewed a cup of tea and sat near the window. Outside, children were playing, their laughter blending with the rustle of leaves. Inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, calm. For the first time in forever, I wasn't waiting for a phone to ring. I wasn't calculating bills, or worrying if they would call me only when they needed something. I was simply there, alive, present, complete. That night, sleep came to me like an old friend returning after years away. I didn't dream of confrontation or betrayal. I dreamed of a quiet lake, still water, and my... The next morning, I woke early and opened the curtains wide. Light spilled into every corner of my home, touching the old photographs, the worn furniture, and even the empty chair where my late husband used to sit. I took a deep breath and said softly, "I think I can start over now." I took out a small notebook and wrote on the first page, plans for my new life. 1. Visit the park again. 2. Paint something. 3. Learn Italian. 4. Call Diana. 5. Do something just for me. Simple goals, but each word was a tiny rebellion against the years I had spent living for everyone but myself. Around noon, my phone buzzed. The caller ID was hidden, but curiosity made me answer. "Mrs. Richter, this is Officer Daniels. Your son reported concerns about your mental health. May we stop by for a welfare check?" I smiled, not in anger, but in disbelief. They weren't done yet. "Of course, officer," I replied calmly. "Please bring a copy of the report I'm about to file for elder abuse and financial coercion." Silence. Then a cough. "Yes, ma'am," he said, his tone shifting instantly. When the officers arrived, I welcomed them politely. I offered them coffee, showed them my legal documents from Mr. Weber, and walked them through the house. After a few minutes, the younger officer smiled awkwardly. "Ma'am, you seem completely fine. We'll mark this as a false report." When they left, I locked the new door behind them, feeling stronger than I had in years. Power didn't roar, it whispered. And that day, its whisper was mine. That evening, I called my sister Diana. The moment she picked up, she gasped, "Rena, you sound like yourself again." "I think I am," I said. I told her everything: the wedding, the humiliation, the confrontation. When I finished, she said softly, "You gave them everything you had. Now, it's time to give something to yourself." Her words sank deep into me like sunlight warming frozen soil. A week later, I received a handwritten letter from Max. The familiar slant of his handwriting twisted something inside my chest. He wrote,
"Mom, Lena and I miss you. Things got out of hand. I know we hurt you, but please don't give up on us. You're still my mother. Max." I sat with that letter for a long while. Not crying, not angry, just quiet. Because love doesn't vanish, it just learns where it's no longer safe to live. I folded the paper gently and placed it in a small wooden box labeled past. Then I locked it away. On a fresh page of my notebook, I wrote, "Forgive, but never return." 2 weeks later, I joined a local art class for retirees. At first, my hands trembled as I dipped the brush into paint. But slowly, those trembling strokes became confident lines, red, blue, and gold dancing across the canvas. One afternoon, the instructor stopped behind me and said, "That's beautiful. What are you painting?" I smiled. "Freedom," I said. He looked confused for a moment, then nodded quietly, as if he understood more than words could explain. Days turned into weeks, and with each one, I felt lighter. I went on morning walks by the lake, fed the ducks, smiled at strangers, and started reading again. I realized the world hadn't stopped when I stopped giving, it had simply waited for me to notice it again. One evening, while returning home from the park, I saw a couple walking hand in hand. For a brief second, I thought of Max and Lena. But instead of bitterness, I whispered a small prayer. May they one day learn what love truly means, not what it costs. When I reached home, the golden light of sunset filled my kitchen. I brewed myself tea, sat at the same table that had once been covered in unpaid bills, and laughed softly. This time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. It was mine. And that night, before going to bed, I wrote one final line in my notebook: "Freedom has a price, but peace is worth every penny." Then I closed the book, turned off the lights, and smiled in the dark, not as a broken mother, but as a woman reborn. It had been nearly 4 months since I last heard from Max. The seasons had shifted gently, spring had given way to early summer. The trees outside my window were alive with green, the kind of green that carries the scent of new beginnings. I had just finished painting a small landscape, soft pastels, a quiet lake, and the silhouette of a woman standing alone when the doorbell rang. A sound so ordinary, yet my heart froze. I opened the door. There he was, Max. His eyes were tired, his hair unkempt, and there was something about his posture, a heaviness, a silence that told me more than any apology could. He looked smaller somehow, like life had chipped away at his pride. Mom, that single word cracked open a world of memories. I didn't move. I didn't speak. He continued, "Can I come in?" I hesitated for a second, then stepped aside. "Yes, Max. You can come in." He looked around the house, his eyes landing on the paintings, the new curtains, the plants by the window. "It's beautiful in here," he said softly. "It's peaceful," I replied. We sat opposite each other, there thick with everything unsaid. For a while, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, "Lena and we're not together anymore." His voice broke slightly. "I tried, Mom. I really did. But she said she couldn't stand how much I still talked about you." I watched him carefully. His hands were trembling slightly. He looked like the little boy who once came running home crying after losing his first soccer game. Only now, the game was life and the loss was heavier. "Max," I said gently, "I never wanted to be against you. I only wanted to see you happy. But happiness built on disrespect never lasts." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I know that now. I thought I was protecting her, being a good husband. But I forgot how to be a good son." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a photograph, one of us, taken years ago. I was holding him at the beach, his little arms around my neck, both of us smiling into the wind. He placed it on the table. "I kept this," he whispered. "Even when things got bad. My heart ached, but I stayed calm. Love doesn't need to scream, it just needs to breathe." "I'm not angry anymore," I said quietly. "I'm just done trying to earn the love I already gave freely." He looked down, ashamed. "I want to make it right," he said. "If you'll let me." For the first time in a long while, I truly looked at him not as the man who broke me, but as the boy I had raised. The boy who once placed flowers on my bedside table every Mother's Day. The boy who promised, "Mom, I'll always take care of you." Something inside me softened. But softness isn't surrender, it's strength wearing grace. "Max," I said slowly, "you don't need to fix the past. You just need to grow from it. But that doesn't mean things go back to the way they were." He nodded. "I understand." We sat in silence again, this time not out of guilt, but acceptance. The ticking of the clock filled the space between us. After a while, I stood and poured 2 cups of tea. He smiled faintly. "Chamomile, always," I said, and we both laughed softly, awkwardly, but honestly. He looked at my paintings again. "You're really good at this," he said. "You found something new." I nodded. "I found myself." He sipped his tea, then said, "You know, I thought you'd hate me forever." "I did," I said truthfully. "But hate takes energy. And I decided to use that energy for peace instead." He smiled through tears. "You always did know how to make me feel both small and safe at the same time." When he stood to leave, I walked him to the door. He turned back once more. "Mom, can I visit again?" I thought for a moment. "Yes," I said. "But not because you need to. Come when you want to." He nodded, tears in his eyes. Then he walked away, shoulders lighter than when he had arrived. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, I stood by the window watching the light fade into gold. I wasn't crying. I wasn't relieved either. I was simply still.
Because closure isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the quiet realization that the story no longer hurts. I looked at the old photograph he had brought and placed it in my notebook beside the line I had written weeks ago, "Forgive, but never return." But this time, I added a new line beneath it, "Love, but let go." Weeks passed again. Max visited every Sunday, not out of guilt, but out of love. He helped fix the garden, brought me books, sometimes just sat quietly beside me, both of us watching the sunset without words. And one evening, as he left, he said, "You were right, Mom. Freedom has a price. But peace is priceless." I smiled and whispered, "And now you finally understand." As the door closed behind him, I looked around my home, the same home that once felt like a cage, now filled with light and laughter again. And for the first time in years, I realized this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of ours. the house was quiet again. Not the lonely kind of quiet that used to echo after betrayal, but the peaceful kind, the one that feels like a deep breath after a long cry. I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the evening sky melt into shades of gold and pink. The garden Max helped me rebuild was in full bloom: roses, daisies, and small yellow marigolds that caught the sunlight like tiny flames. The wind whispered softly through the leaves, and I could almost hear my own mother's voice. "Someday, Rena, your children will understand what you gave up for them." Back then, I never truly understood her words. Now, sitting here decades later, I finally did. Motherhood is strange. You give and give and give until one day, you realize you've given everything, even the parts of yourself you didn't know could be given. I remembered the first day I held Max in my arms. He was so small, so fragile. I promised myself then that I would never let the world hurt him. I didn't know that one day, it would be him who would break me instead. But that's the thing about love, it doesn't come with guarantees. It's not a transaction. It's a seed you plant in hope, knowing it might bloom, or it might wither. You love anyway. Later that evening, I opened my notebook again. On a fresh page, I wrote, "A mother's love doesn't fade when her children forget her. It simply waits quietly, patiently, like the moon waiting for nightfall." I looked around my room. There were photographs everywhere: Max at his graduation, my late husband smiling in a faded frame, my younger self holding a toddler who wouldn't stop giggling. Each picture was a memory, a proof of life lived fully, even through pain. And then it hit me: I had spent years believing my story was over when my children stopped calling. But maybe, just maybe, it had only just begun. The next morning, I joined the community center again, this time to volunteer. They asked me to speak to young mothers, women just starting their journey, juggling jobs, diapers, dreams, and exhaustion. I told them my story, not to make them afraid, but to make them aware. I told them, raise your children with love, but also with boundaries. Teach them kindness, but also teach them accountability. Because one day, when they grow, they won't remember the gifts you bought, they'll remember how safe they felt in your presence. Some cried, some smiled, and one young woman came up to me after the session and said, "My mom and I haven't spoken in years. I think I'll call her tonight." That night, when I lay in bed, I whispered to myself, "That's it, Rena. That's the purpose." A few weeks later, Max brought his little daughter to visit. Her name was Emma, tiny, curious, eyes full of wonder. "Grandma," she said, climbing into my lap, "Daddy said you make the best pancakes in the world." I laughed. Did he now? We cooked together that morning, flour all over the kitchen, laughter echoing in every corner. And as I watched them, both father and daughter, I realized something powerful. Love, when healed, passes on. All the pain, all the heartbreak, it had been worth it if it meant this little girl would grow up learning what true love looks like. Later that evening, Max sat beside me on the porch. The air was cool, the world painted in the soft hues of twilight. He said quietly, "I used to think being strong meant being in control. But you taught me that being strong means forgiving." I smiled, touching his hand gently. "Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, Max. It just makes the future lighter." He looked at me for a long moment, eyes wet with gratitude. "Thank you, Mom, for not closing the door forever." And I told him the truth I had learned the hard way. "I never closed it, Max. I just waited for you to knock, not out of guilt, but out of love." As the night deepened, Emma fell asleep on my lap. Her small hand rested over mine, warm and trusting. I looked up at the stars and thought about every mother in the world, the ones awake at AM, the ones forgotten in old houses, the ones who sacrificed everything for their children's happiness, and the ones still waiting for a call that never comes. To all of them, I wanted to say, you are seen, you are loved, and your story matters. The next morning, I recorded a voice message for the community group, a small speech, really, but one that came straight from my soul. A mother is not a saint. She's a human being with dreams, fears, and scars. But she chooses every single day to put love first. And even when the world forgets her, Even when her children turn away, she remains the quiet backbone of every home, the unseen light that never stops glowing. When I finished recording, I sat in silence, tears streaming down my cheeks, not of sadness, but of peace. That night, I went to the balcony again. The moon was bright, full, and soft. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Mom, I finally understand. You were right all along. Love doesn't disappear, it transforms." The wind carried my words away into the night. And in that moment, I felt her presence, like a gentle hand on my shoulder, telling me that everything had come full circle. As I turned to go inside, I looked at my reflection in the window. Older now, wiser, calm. But behind that reflection, I saw something else, a story that had begun in pain and ended in peace. I smiled softly and whispered the final words of my life's lesson. A mother's love is not measured by what she receives, but by what she continues to give even when there's nothing left to gain. And with that, I turned off the lights, the moonlight resting gently on my face, and let the night cradle me not as a forgotten mother, but as a woman finally at peace with the world she helped create.